There is something that happens the moment the body lies down. The room goes quiet. The day, with all its weight and noise, and the thousand small things it asked of you, the day finally stops asking. And you think, perhaps, that the mind will follow, that it will take its cue from the darkness, from the stillness, from the simple fact of the pillow beneath your head. You think it will soften, go quiet, let you go, and then it starts. A thought about something you said, a thought about something you forgot to do, a voice running through a conversation you had, or one you haven't had yet, rehearsing it, refining it, worrying it like a stone in a pocket, a memory arriving uninvited, a fear wearing the costume of a plan. And somewhere beneath all of that, underneath the thoughts themselves, there is often a quieter and more troubling sense, a sense that this is somehow your fault, that a calmer person, a better person, a person who had their life more together, would simply close their eyes and sleep, that the thoughts mean something is wrong with you. They don't. You are not broken. You are human. And the mind doing exactly this, spinning, rehearsing, reviewing, worrying, is a mind doing precisely what minds have done since long before anyone alive today was born. This is not a flaw. It is not a failure. It is simply the nature of the thing. But here is what we might sit with tonight, slowly, gently, with no pressure and no requirement. Here is the one question that has been sitting quietly at the center of things for a very long time, asked by many people, in many small rooms, when the night went long and the mind would not stop. If you can hear the thought, who is doing the hearing? That is all. We will not rush toward an answer tonight. We will only walk around it slowly, the way you might walk around something old and interesting in the grass, not grabbing at it, only looking. You do not have to understand anything. You do not have to remember any of this tomorrow. You do not have to do anything at all except let the words come in and pass through you gently. If you are comfortable, let the body settle a little more into whatever is holding you. Let the shoulders find their way down, not because you are trying to relax, simply because the weight of the body has always known where to go when it is not being asked to do anything else. Let the breath move as it already moves, not a special breath, just the one that has been there all along. And let us begin. There is an old way of describing the mind that goes something like this. The mind, it says, is like the sky, and the thoughts that move through it, the worries, the memories, the voices, the plans, those are like the weather. Sit with that for a moment. The sky does not become the weather. A storm crosses it. Clouds pile themselves up into shapes that look, for a little while, like something ominous, something permanent. Rain comes, wind comes, the sky turns colors it has never quite turned before. And then the weather passes, and the sky is there, unchanged, exactly as spacious, exactly as open, exactly as itself as it was before the storm arrived. The sky is never harmed by the weather. It never needs to fight the weather. It does not have to push the clouds away or argue with the rain. It simply is what it is, open, present, larger than whatever moves across it. And the weather does its thing, and then the weather moves on. This is perhaps the oldest image for what you actually are, underneath the thoughts. Not the thoughts themselves, not the noise, the sky. And you might be thinking, as you lie there, that sounds very peaceful, but it does not feel like that. It feels like I am the storm. It feels like I am caught in it. It feels like the thoughts are not passing across me. They are me. They are all there is, and they have been going for some time now, and I can't find the edge of them. That feeling is real, and it makes complete sense. Because when you are inside weather, it is hard to remember the sky. When the clouds are thick enough, you can look up and see nothing but more cloud. That does not mean the sky is gone. It only means the cloud is between you and the memory of it. Tonight, we are not trying to get rid of the weather. We are not trying to make the thoughts stop, because they will do what they do regardless of what we ask of them. We are only gently and quietly going to practice remembering that you are not the thoughts. You're the one in whom the thoughts arise. Let us explore a story about this. Long ago, in a small village beside a wide river, there lived a woman who made cloth. She had been weaving since she was young, had learned it from her mother, had spent so many years at the loom that the motion of it had become part of her body, something her hands did almost on their own while her mind went elsewhere. She was known in the village as a calm woman, patient, the kind of person others came to when they could not find their footing. But inside, she had a secret she kept carefully to herself. Her mind, she believed, was unusually difficult, louder than other people's minds, more persistent, more tangled. When she lay down at night, the thoughts arrived in great dark knots, and she would spend hours trying to pull them apart. And the more she pulled, the tighter they seemed to draw. She had tried many things over the years. She had tried willing the thoughts away. She had tried replacing them with better ones. She had tried getting up and working in the dark, so that at least the insomnia would be useful. None of it helped for long. One autumn, a teacher came to the valley. He was not a dramatic man. He did not make speeches or gather crowds. He simply went from village to village and sat with people for a while. And sometimes he said something small and useful, and then he moved on. He came to her house at the end of a long day and sat across from her while she finished a row on the loom. She did not stop weaving. He did not ask her to. After a while, he said, "What do you do when a knot appears in the thread?" She considered this. She said, "I stop pulling. If I pull at a knot, it only draws tighter. I have to stop and set the thread down and look at the shape of the knot before I do anything else." He nodded. He said nothing more for a long time. Then he got up and thanked her for the tea she had not made yet, and he went away. That night, lying in the dark, the thoughts arrived as they always did, and something about the conversation was still in her hands. She noticed herself reaching toward the first thought, ready to pull at it, ready to argue with it or follow it wherever it led. And she stopped, not dramatically, just a small, quiet stopping. She did not pull at the knot. She looked at it instead, just looked. Here is a worry about my daughter. Here is something I should have said differently 3 days ago. Here is the thought about the roof that needs repair. She did not agree with the thoughts or disagree with them. She only named them, the way you might name clouds. Here is a large grey one. Here is one that looks like something threatening. Here is a long, thin one moving quickly toward the hills. And in the looking, something in her eased. Not because the thoughts disappeared. They didn't, not all of them. But there was a small gap between herself and them. Just enough room to notice. I am the one looking at the knot. I am not the knot. That is what the story shows us, perhaps. Not a technique, not a solution, only a shift in where we stand. When we pull at thoughts, arguing with them, trying to reason them away, trying to replace them with better ones, we are standing inside the knot, and everything tightens. When we step back just far enough to say, here is a thought, here is what it looks like, without immediately reaching for it, something softens. The thought is still there, but we are not inside it. We are the one who can see it. You can try this tonight, not as an instruction, but as an invitation. When a thought arrives, and they always do, you might let it arrive without immediately reaching for it. You might simply say, inside, something like, "Here is a thought." Just that. No more. Here is a thought about tomorrow. Here is a thought that worries. Here is one I have had many times before. You are not fighting anything. You are not succeeding or failing. You are only practicing the smallest movement of all, stepping back just far enough to see that you are the sky in which the thought appears, not the thought itself. Let the breath come and go. Wherever your hands are resting, let them rest more fully. There is nothing to hold tonight. Everything that needed holding was held today. For now, the hands are just hands resting. When you are ready, we will continue together. And here is a question that sounds simple, but is actually quite strange when you sit with it for long. Enough. Who is the one talking inside your head? You know the voice. Everyone knows it. It is the voice that comments on things as they happen. The voice that reminds, criticizes, plans, remembers, doubts. The voice that started up the moment you lay down tonight, going over the events of the day, sorting them, evaluating them, worrying at the edges of tomorrow. You know the voice. But who is listening to it? This is not a trick question. It is not a riddle with a clever answer at the end. It is simply an observation that has been made very quietly by many people in many different times and places. There is the voice, and there is the one who hears the voice. And those two things are not the same. The voice says, "You should have done that differently." The voice says, "What if this doesn't work out?" The voice says, "You are tired and tomorrow will be difficult and there is so much left undone." And somewhere, quietly, underneath all of that, there is something that is hearing all of it. Something that is aware of the voice, the way the sky is aware of the weather, not by doing anything, not by choosing to be there, but simply by being what it is. That something, that quiet, background awareness, is what many old traditions have spent a very long time trying to point toward, not describe exactly, not define or name or box into a doctrine. Only point toward, the way you might point at the moon without pretending your finger is the moon itself. Tonight, if you notice the voice in your head, you might let that noticing be the practice, not silencing the voice, not arguing with it, simply noticing there is a voice, and I am the one who hears it. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a young student at a small monastery in the mountains, where she had gone to study and to try to find some peace with a mind she had long considered her enemy. She was clever, careful, deeply earnest. She kept meticulous notes. She tried harder at the practices than anyone around her. And still, the mind gave her no rest. There was one thought in particular, a voice that had lived in her head for as long as she could remember. The voice said, "You are not good enough." Not in those words exactly. It wore many disguises. Sometimes it said, "You missed something important." Sometimes it said, "Everyone else is doing this better than you." Sometimes it said, "You will never really get there." But underneath all its disguises, it was always saying the same thing. Not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. She went to the oldest teacher at the monastery, a woman who sat in the corner garden in all weather and seemed to find everything gently amusing without ever being unkind. The student sat down and described the voice carefully. The teacher listened with complete attention. When the student was done, the teacher asked, And where are you while the voice is speaking? The student said, I am listening to it, I suppose, being heard by it. The teacher nodded. She said, so there is the voice, and there is the one who hears the voice. Those are two different things, yes? The student agreed, somewhat impatiently, because this seemed obvious and beside the point. The teacher said, and when you wake up in the morning, before the voice has started yet, before the mind has begun, what is there in that first moment? The student thought. She said, just wakefulness, I suppose. Just being awake, before anything has started. The teacher said, and is the voice there in that moment? No, the student admitted, not yet. So said the teacher, very gently, what are you before the voice begins? The student sat with this for a long time. The teacher waited. What came to her slowly was not an answer exactly. It was more like a recognition. There was something that preceded the voice, something that was there before the commentary began, something simple and plain, and not particularly troubled. Not good enough lived in the voice, but the one who heard the voice. That thing had no such judgment in it. It was simply awake, simply present, simply aware. The voice was a guest in the house. She had been mistaking the guest for the house itself. Perhaps that is the simplest way to say what the story shows. The voice, whatever it is saying, however persistent it is, however many years it has been saying the same thing, the voice is a guest. It comes and goes, even if it has been coming for a very long time. But you, the one who hears, the quiet awareness underneath it, you are the house. You were there before the voice arrived. You are there in the spaces between its sentences. You are there after it has finally, at last, fallen silent. The voice may not stop tonight. It may continue doing exactly what it has always done, offering its opinions and its worries and its old familiar criticisms. That is all right. You are not fighting it. You are not trying to make it leave. You are only, very gently, practicing the art of noticing. That is the guest. I am the house, and the house is not troubled by the guest, not truly. The house simply holds. The house simply is. It has held many guests over the years. Some stayed a long time. Some were easier than others. But none of them ever became the house. None of them changed what the house fundamentally was. The place of shelter, the place of rest, the place that remains standing when the guest has eventually, quietly, found their way out. You have been the house all along. Before the voice arrived, you were the house. In the spaces between what the voice says, those small pauses you might not even notice, the brief gaps where the commentary stops for just a moment before starting again. In those gaps you can feel the house, the simple, solid, untroubled nature of the thing that holds everything. You do not have to find the gap right now. You do not have to work for it. Only know that it is there, that it has always been there, that the house does not disappear because the guest is being noisy. Let the weight of your body speak to whatever is holding it. The bed, the floor, the ground beneath. All of it is holding you without being asked to, without effort, without wanting anything in return. You are held. You are already held. Nothing is required of you in this moment but the willingness to rest. Take one slow breath, as slow as feels easy. And when you are ready, we will go on. There is something that happens in certain quiet moments. In the early morning before the mantra started up, or at the very edge of sleep, or sometimes in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, for just a second, without trying, a kind of gap appears, A small open space in which there is no commentary, no problem, no plan. Just this, just here, just the breath moving, just the room. And then the mind catches itself being quiet, and the commentary begins. Oh, I was relaxed just then. I should hold on to that. Why can't it be like that all the time? And the gap closes. This is something that has been noticed for a very long time. The peace we are looking for is not somewhere else. It is not in a better version of the day or a different set of circumstances or the solution to the problem currently at the front of the queue. It is already here, underneath the thinking. The way the bottom of a river is already there, quiet and still and full of fish, even when the surface is rough with wind. This is perhaps the strangest teaching of all, because it sounds like it cannot possibly be true. If peace were already here, surely we would feel it. Surely it would be obvious. Surely we would not spend so many nights lying awake wondering where it went. But here is the thing about muddy water. Muddy water, when you put it in a glass and leave it alone, clears on its own. You do not have to do anything to make the sediment settle. You only have to stop stirring it. And it takes time. And while it is still cloudy, you might think, this will never clear. But if you have ever seen a glass of muddy water that was simply left alone long enough, you know that it always does. The mind is something like that. Not broken, not needing to be fixed, only stirred up. And the stirring, the reaching for thoughts, the pulling at knots, the fighting of the weather, the stirring is the one thing that keeps the water cloudy. What you're doing tonight, lying here, not trying to solve anything, not trying to force sleep to come, that is the practice of setting the glass down, of stopping the stirring, and letting what is already in you begin, quietly, at its own pace, to settle. You do not have to make anything happen. In fact, the trying to make things happen is often the last piece of stirring. Tonight, if there is nothing else you take from this, let it be this. You're allowed to stop trying. You're allowed to simply be here in the dark, with the thoughts moving across you the way weather moves across the sky, not fighting them, not welcoming them, simply noticing. Let us explore a story about this. In a quiet coastal village, there was a fisherman who had been on the water for most of his life. He was old now, unhurried, and had long since stopped being bothered by the things that bothered the younger fishermen. They sometimes asked him how he stayed so even, so unruffled, when the catches were poor or the sea was rough. He would think about this for a while before answering. He was not a man who spoke quickly. He said once, "There is a moment before the day's worries start, before you have checked the weather and thought about the catch and worried about the boat. Just for a moment, when I first come down to the water in the early dark, I don't know why it happens. The water is black, the stars are out, my hands are cold, and for just a second I am not thinking about anything at all. I am just there. I am just the water and the dark and the cold and whatever I am." He paused, looking out. "I used to try to hold on to that moment," he said. "Reach for it. Try to keep it longer. And the moment I did that, it was gone. Now I just let it be what it is. I don't try to make it last. I just know it's there. And when the worries come back, and they always do, I know they're not the whole thing. I know there's something underneath them, something that was there before they started and will be there when they stop." He looked at the person who had asked him. "That's all," he said. "That's the whole thing. There is not much to add to that, perhaps." The fisherman had not found peace by eliminating the worries. He had found it by discovering something underneath them that the worries did not touch. And he had learned, the hard way, over many years, that the trying to hold on to the gap only closed it. It was only available in the not trying. Let us explore another story about this from a different angle. There was an old woman in a village who was known for her clarity of mind, even in great old age. When others her age were easily confused or easily upset, she remained even, unhurried, steady. Younger people sometimes asked what the secret was. She would think carefully and then say something like, "I stopped trying to be at peace a long time ago." This always puzzled the younger people, who had assumed peace was something built up slowly through effort and the right kind of discipline. She would see their puzzlement and smile, not unkindly. She would say, "I used to try. I tried for a long time. I tried to be calm. I tried to have a quiet mind. I tried not to be bothered by things. And the trying itself was the most exhausting thing I had ever done, because the trying made me pay attention to every disturbance, every thought that was not the right kind of thought." She would pause and look off somewhere. Then she would say, "And one day I just stopped, not because I gave up, but because I finally heard what the trying was saying underneath itself, which was, you are not already at peace. The peace is somewhere ahead, and you have not arrived yet." And I thought, what if that is not true? What if I am already whatever I am, and the peace is not somewhere I am going, but something underneath where I'm standing? She would shrug a little, as though this were obvious. She would say, "I stopped digging for the water. I stood still, and the water was there. It had always been there. I had been digging past it. That is the image to carry, not digging for the water. Standing still long enough to feel it under the feet, which is where you are right now. You are not trying to sleep exactly. You are not trying to force anything. You are lying here, letting words come in and pass through you. And if the thoughts come, they come. And if the body softens, it softens. And there is no score being kept, and no moment at which you have failed or succeeded. You are just here. And something underneath the thoughts, something that was there before any of this started, something that will be there after the thoughts have finally, one by one, wound down, that something is simply present, simply awake in its own quiet way. Perhaps the most useful thing to know going into sleep is that you are not trying to arrive anywhere. You are already on the ground. The water is already underneath. The peace is not an achievement waiting at the end of a successful practice. It is the nature of the thing you already are, when the trying and the stirring quiet down long enough to reveal it. Let the sounds of the room be whatever they are. Near sounds and far sounds, the particular quiet of wherever you are lying tonight. You don't have to do anything with the sounds. They are simply the world being itself alongside you, and you are simply you being yourself alongside it. Rest here for a moment. Let the breath be slow, and we will continue when you are ready. Now here is something the mind does reliably in the dark. It argues with what is already true. Something happened today, and the mind says, it shouldn't have. Something is the way it is, and the mind says, it should be different. A situation exists, and the mind turns it over and over, not because turning it over will change it, but because something in us believes that if we only think hard enough, carefully enough, long enough, we will somehow revise what has already occurred. And this is not foolishness. This is not a character flaw. This is one of the most deeply human things there is. The mind that can imagine how things could be otherwise is also the mind that builds and plans and repairs and improves. It is a good and useful mind. But at night, with the body lying still and the day already over, and the things that happened already having happened, this same useful mind turns its energy toward events it cannot change. It argues with the past. It argues with the present. It argues with the already done. And the arguing, this is the part worth looking at. The arguing is not neutral. Arguing with what is costs something. Not because the thing being argued against is fine. Sometimes it is not fine. Sometimes things are genuinely hard, genuinely unfair, genuinely worth wanting otherwise. But there is a difference between acknowledging that and arguing with it. Acknowledgement says, this is hard, and it is real. Argument says, this should not be, this cannot be. I refuse to accept this is, and spends the night going in circles. There is a crack that runs through a pot, the old teachers say, and the choice is not whether the crack is there. The choice is whether to spend the night arguing with the crack, or to set the pot down gently and rest. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a potter in a small valley who had spent her whole season making a large set of vessels for a neighboring village. She had been careful. She had used the best clay she could find, had tended the firing closely, had put more of herself into this work than she sometimes did. She was proud of it. She was tired from it in a way that felt good. On the day she opened the kiln, she found that a flaw had entered the firing. Not all the pieces, most of them were fine, were better than fine, but a third of them had cracked. Small cracks, in most cases. Not the dramatic failure of a badly made thing, but cracks nonetheless. The vessels would not hold water. They were not what she had intended. She stood in front of the kiln for a long time. Inside, the argument began immediately, as arguments do. She should have watched the temperature more carefully. She should have used different clay. She had known, somewhere in the back of her mind, that the conditions were not quite right, and she had gone ahead anyway. And now look. The argument went through every decision she had made, every point at which she might have done something differently, every error she might have prevented. It was thorough. It was exhaustive. It changed nothing about the cracked pots. She was still standing there when her neighbor came by, an old man who grew vegetables and had never made anything with clay in his life. He looked at the cracked pots for a while. He picked one up. He said, "Have you ever seen light come through a crack in a wall?" She said she had. He set the pot down and went home. That evening, sitting with the pots she could not sell, she began to look at them differently. The cracks were not what she had made, but they were what she had. And the argument with them, the endless rehearsal of what should have been, was taking up the space where something else might live. Something like rest. Something like an honest look at what the pots actually were, rather than what they were supposed to be. She did not become glad the pots had cracked. That is not what the story is suggesting. The loss was real. The extra work was real. The disappointment was real and worth feeling. But she stopped arguing with the fact of the cracks. And in the stopping, there was a kind of rest she had not felt in days. Not happiness exactly. Not satisfaction. Only the particular quiet that comes when something you have been pushing against stops being pushed against. The way a held breath feels when it is finally released. Not because anything has been resolved, but because the holding has stopped. The cracks were still there in the morning. The loss was still real. The extra work was still ahead of her. But she met all of it differently, having spent a night not arguing with it. She met it with clearer eyes, with more patience, with something like steadiness, which is different from contentment, but is its own kind of gift. tonight, if there is something the mind is arguing with, something that happened today, something that is true that you would prefer were not true, some crack in the work of the day, you might try, just for tonight, just for this one night, the small practice of setting down the argument, not agreeing with what is hard, not pretending the crack isn't there, only noticing this happened. It is real, and I am spending energy arguing with the fact of it, which changes nothing except that it costs me sleep. What would happen if you simply let the cracked pot sit there on the shelf tonight? Not thrown away, not declared fine, just acknowledged and then set down. You don't have to figure anything out tonight. Tonight, the kiln is cold. Tomorrow is soon enough for the work of repair. Let the body be heavy. Let the face soften. The small muscles around the eyes, the jaw. These are the places the argument lives, sometimes, without our knowing. Let them release toward the pillow, toward the dark. There is nothing the body needs to hold on to right now. Rest here, and when you are ready, we will walk on together. Here is something that can feel, in the night, like a kind of emergency, even though it is not one. The mind says, if I stop thinking about this, something will be lost. If I set down the worry, the thing being worried about will be abandoned. If I let go of the problem, even for a night, something important will slip away. And this feeling is surprisingly powerful. It can sit in the chest like a small, insistent knot, and every time you drift toward quiet, it pulls you back, because it believes, sincerely, earnestly, that your attention is the thing standing between the people and situations you care about, and some terrible outcome. That the vigilance is the protection. But here is the thing. Here is the thing the mind does not want to look at directly. The worrying is not the same as the caring. The sleepless rehearsal of every possible difficulty is not the same as protecting anyone. The problem you cannot solve tonight will not be solved by tonight's going over and over it. And the people you love do not need your worry. They need your rest. They need you present, patient, capable tomorrow. And for that, you need tonight. Resting is not abandoning what matters. Setting down the cup of worry for these hours is not the same as dropping what is in the cup. The cup will be there in the morning. The concerns will be there. The things that need attending to will still need attending to. And in the morning, you will attend to them. But tonight, the workshop is closed. Tonight, the hands can be still. There is an old image for this. A lamp burning in a window. The lamp does not need anyone watching it to keep burning. It simply burns. The house it lights does not need anyone sitting up through the dark hours to remain standing. It simply stands. The light is there whether you are watching or not. You can rest, and the things you carry can rest here alongside you, held in the same dark room, and nothing will be lost. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a student who was known for the weight he carried, not a physical weight. He was lean, quick, good at the physical work of the monastery. But from the time he woke to the time he lay down, he carried a brimming cup, full to the very rim, and he walked with enormous care so that not a drop would spill. Every step was deliberate. He never ran. He never relaxed his attention for a moment. The cup was, of course, not real. It was made of everything he was responsible for, everyone depending on him, every task not yet finished, every worry about what might go wrong. The old teacher watched him for a long time. One morning she called him over. She pointed to a bench in the garden and said, "Set the cup down." He said, "But then it might spill. If I put it down, I can't watch it." She said, It's not yours to watch day and night. You're not the cup's guardian. You're a person who picked up a cup a long time ago and forgot you could set it down. He looked uncertain. She said, "Set it down. I'll still be here. The garden will still be here. The cup will still be here in the morning. And tomorrow you can pick it up again if you choose. But tonight," she pointed at the darkening sky, "tonight, the cup does not need you." He set it down, and what he felt was not the lightness he expected. What he felt was a kind of grief, actually, a small ache, because the cup, for all its weight, had been his purpose, and without it, he was not sure what he was. Only a person in a garden, only a person breathing, only here. The teacher seemed to know this. She sat beside him, and they were quiet for a long time. Then she said, "That is what you are when you are not the cup carrier. Just this, just here. And this, just this, is enough for tonight." The story does not say he never picked the cup back up. He did, probably, most mornings. The world goes on asking things of us. The responsibilities are real. The people we love are real. We are not trying to say none of it matters. Only that it does not need to be carried all night. Only that rest is allowed. Only that you can be, for these hours, simply a person lying in the dark, breathing, with a cup sitting on the table nearby, not held, not watched, simply there. Let us explore another story about this. There was once a woman who kept a garden that was her pride and her joy, and also, at times, her source of considerable anxiety. She worried about it when it rained too much, and worried about it when it did not rain enough. She worried about pests and early frost, and the soil and the seeds she had chosen. She was devoted to the garden, in the way people are devoted to things they love, which is to say, somewhat tormented. One evening, an old neighbor came to look at it. He was a quiet man who had kept his own garden for 50 years and who seemed, to the woman's occasional frustration, never to worry about his at all. She sometimes resented how easy he made it look. She showed him around. She pointed out the places she was worried about. She named all the things that might still go wrong. He walked slowly and looked at each thing she pointed to. He said very little. At the end, she asked, "What do you do at night? Do you worry about yours?" He thought about this honestly. He said, "I used to. For about the first 20 years, I worried about mine quite a lot." She said, "And then?" He said, "And then I noticed that the garden was doing most of the work. I was doing some of it, the watering, the weeding, the decisions about what to plant. But the actual growing was happening without me. The roots were going down into the ground whether I was watching or not. The seeds were doing what seeds do, in the dark, underground, out of sight entirely, while I was lying awake worrying about them." He looked at her garden in the evening light. He said, "They don't need you at night. They need the dark. The dark is part of the growing. Everything that happens in a garden underground, in the cold and the dark, that is not the absence of growth. That is growth. That is perhaps the most important part." She did not entirely believe him that evening, but she tried, as an experiment, to let the garden be in the dark without her oversight. She lay down and she thought, "The roots are going down. The seeds are doing what seeds do. The dark is part of it. I do not need to watch." It did not work perfectly the first night, or the second, but slowly, over many evenings, something in her eased. The garden was there in the morning, having done its invisible work without her, and she came to it each day a little more rested, a little more capable of being the gardener it needed. The things you care for do not need you at night. They need the dark, the way all growing things need the dark, for the invisible work, the quiet work, the work that happens when no one is watching and no one can see it, and it proceeds anyway, faithfully and slowly, in the direction of whatever it is becoming. You can rest, and the things you carry can rest here alongside you, held in the same dark room, and nothing will be lost. The growing will continue. The roots will go down. The morning will come. The things you carry know how to wait. They have been waiting for you your whole life. They will wait a few more hours. Let your hands open if they are closed. Let the fingers uncurl. Let the arms be for now, without anything to hold. The breath is enough. The simple fact of being here is enough. When you are ready, we will continue. Let us talk for a moment about attention, and about the quality of it, and about something that changes entirely, depending on where it points. You have probably noticed, most people have, that there is a kind of attention that takes, and there is a kind of attention that rests. The taking kind arrives at something, and immediately asks, is this good or bad? Is this useful? What does it mean for me? It gathers and evaluates and sorts, and the mind doing this kind of looking is busy, even if the body is still. But there is another kind of looking, the kind that a gardener does in the early morning, when no one has asked them to do anything yet. Moving slowly along the rows, noticing what is growing, noticing what is struggling, not fixing anything immediately, only seeing. The way the dew sits on the leaves, the way a particular plant has turned toward the light, the way a small weed has appeared near the base of something larger. This kind of attention does not ask, what does this mean for me? It simply looks, and the looking itself is, in some way that is hard to explain, restful, restorative. It gives something back rather than only taking. You cannot always choose which kind of attention you use. During the day, the evaluating mind is necessary and useful. But at night, lying here, there is perhaps a little room to practice the other kind. Not the attention that asks what everything means. Just the attention that notices. Here is a sound. Just noticing. Here is a sound. Here is the breath. Here is the weight of the blanket. Here is the dark room. Not asking what any of it means or whether it is good or bad or should be different. Only noticing. Let us explore a story about this. There was once an old gardener at a monastery in a wide valley who had tended the same ground for more of his life than not. The younger monks sometimes asked him what the secret was, how he managed to be so calm, so steady, when everything else in the monastery was busy with seeking and striving and the hard work of trying to improve oneself. He would stop whatever he was doing and think about this carefully, because he was a man who took questions seriously even when they seemed to come from impatience. Then he would say, I don't know if it's the garden or me, but I stopped arguing with what grows a long time ago. The younger monks would wait for more, and sometimes he would give it, and sometimes he wouldn't. On one occasion, a particularly earnest student pressed him. She said, but surely you have to make decisions about the garden. You have to decide what to pull and what to keep, where to plant, how to water. The gardener nodded. All true, he said. I do all of those things, and yet you seem at peace with it. He looked at her for a moment. He said, the garden grows the way it grows. I tend it. Those are two different things. I can't make the garden be otherwise than it is. I can only tend it. And when I stopped trying to make it be something other than itself, the tending became easy. it became its own reward. He went back to what he had been doing. She thought about this for a long time afterward. She came to believe, slowly and not all at once, that the gardener's peace came not from having fewer problems, but from having a different relationship to them. He saw them clearly. He worked with them honestly, but he did not demand that they be other than they were. He did not argue with the garden. There is something in this worth staying with for a moment, because it points to something that can be easy to miss. The gardener's peace was not indifference. He was not a man who did not care about the garden. He cared about it enormously. That was why he had tended it for all those years, why he kept coming back, why he knew every corner of it and every plant in it, and every difficulty it faced in each season. His caring was thorough and real, but the caring did not require the garden to be other than it was. He had learned, slowly, through the practice of many seasons, that he could care deeply and tend honestly and still not argue with the growing, still not demand that the weeds be other than weeds, that the weather be other than weather, that the garden meet him on his terms rather than its own. This is one of the quieter and more useful things the night has to offer, if you let it. The dark asks nothing. It does not demand that you be in a particular mood, or that the thoughts be a particular kind of thought, or that the body feel a particular way before rest is allowed. It simply holds. And in the holding, something can ease that cannot ease when everything is being evaluated, when the question is always, is this good enough? Is this the right kind of quiet? Is this what sleep is supposed to feel like? What if tonight is simply tonight? Not a performance of rest, not a test to pass, only the ordinary dark and the ordinary breath and the ordinary mind doing its ordinary thing. And underneath all of it, the same awareness that has been quietly present through every moment of your life, unmoved, unhurried, at home in itself, in a way that has nothing to do with what is happening on the surface. And perhaps what you are in this space tonight is something like that. Not passive, not pretending nothing matters, but simply here, tending without urgency, noticing without evaluating, present for the garden without requiring it to be other than it is. The gardener in you knows what to do. It has always known. Let it do its work gently, without urgency, without the need to fix everything before morning. Let the breath settle deeper in the body. Let the belly be soft. Let the chest, which sometimes holds the day's unfinished business like a second bag, slowly ease its grip. There is room here. There has always been room. Rest for a moment, and then we will continue. There is something about impermanence that the mind knows, but doesn't always believe. The mind knows, in an abstract way, that everything changes. The weather changes. The seasons turn. The people we have known have changed and are changing still. The person you were 10 years ago is related to the person you are tonight, but is not quite the same person. Change is the one constant. The mind knows this, and yet, when a mood arrives, when a heaviness settles in, or an anxiety sharpens, or a sadness takes up residence in the chest, the mind forgets everything it knows about impermanence and behaves as though this mood is permanent, as though the particular weather of this particular night is not weather at all but climate, as though the heaviness is not a passing state but a defining truth. It is not. It is weather, and weather always changes. This does not mean the mood is not real. It is real. The heaviness, the worry, the grief, the sharp edge of whatever tonight has brought. These are real, and they are worthy of acknowledgement. We are not trying to dismiss them or paper over them with false cheer or pretend that the difficult things are secretly fine, only to say they are not permanent. They have not always been here. They will not always be here. They are real and they are passing, the way real weather is real and passing. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a person who lived beside the sea and made their living repairing nets. It was work that required patience, good eyesight, and a tolerance for repetition. The nets were always tearing, always coming back needing work, and no sooner was one mended than another arrived. This person had known a great deal of loss, not the dramatic kind, not all at once, but the slow accumulating kind. A child who had moved far away, a partner who had died before their time, a friendship that had faded for reasons neither person had fully understood. The losses had happened over many years, and they lived in the body the way losses do. A particular tiredness in the shoulders, a tendency to look at the horizon more than most people did. One season, a young person came to apprentice in the work. The young person was curious and a little impatient, and asked many questions. One day the young person asked, "How do you keep coming back? Every morning the nets are torn again. Every morning the work starts over. How do you not give up?" The old net mender thought about this for a long time, pulling thread through the gap in the net with practiced hands. Then they said, "See the tide." The young person looked. The tide was coming in. "Tomorrow morning," the old net mender said, "it will be going out." The day after, coming in again. None of it asks for my opinion. It only asks for my attention. They worked in silence for a while. Then the old net mender said, "My moods are like tides, heavy sometimes, easy sometimes, in between mostly. I used to think the heavy ones were true and the easy ones were luck. Now I think they're all weather, all tide, real while they're happening, gone when they go." The young person said, "That sounds lonely." The old net mender shook their head. "It sounds true," they said. "The loneliness is something else. Perhaps that is the distinction the story is drawing. The mood is not the whole truth. It is a true mood, genuinely felt, genuinely there. But it is not a final verdict on the situation. It is not a permanent weather." Let us explore another story about this. There was once a monk who lived at a mountain monastery and was known among the community for his equanimity. He was not a dramatic man. He did not make speeches about impermanence or give elaborate teachings. He simply seemed, in all weathers of mood and season and circumstance, to rest in something deeper than whatever was passing across him. A young woman studying at the monastery watched him carefully for a year, trying to understand. At the end of the year, she went to him and said, "How do you do it? How do you remain so steady when everything around you changes?" He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "I make friends with the season." She waited for more. He said, "Not the season I want it to be. Not the season that is easier. The actual season. Whatever is here. In summer I make friends with the heat. In winter with the cold. When things are going well, I make friends with that. When things are difficult, I make friends with the difficulty." She said, "But making friends with difficulty, doesn't that mean accepting things you shouldn't accept?" He shook his head. He said, "Making friends with the winter doesn't mean you won't light a fire. It means you stop resenting the winter for being what it is. You can light a fire and still acknowledge, this is winter. It is cold. That is what winter is." He was quiet for a moment, Then he said, "The season always changes. Every winter I've ever known has ended. Every period of difficulty I have sat with has eventually shifted. Not always to something easy. Sometimes it shifted to something different and hard in a new way. But it shifted. The changing is the one constant. And if I know that, if I really know it, in the body, not just in the mind, then I am never fully imprisoned by any weather because I know the weather will move." She thought about this for a long time. She said, "And when you're in the middle of a very hard winter, when you cannot feel the spring?" He said, "Then I try to find the one small thing in the winter that is winter's own gift. The particular quality of the cold, the way the trees look without leaves, the early darkness that brings a kind of quiet you cannot find in summer. Every season has its gift, even the hardest ones." She went away from that conversation, not entirely persuaded, but carrying something new, a small permission, maybe, the permission to stop fighting the season, not to love it, not to pretend it was anything other than what it was, but to meet it without resistance, to acknowledge, this is what is here, and this too will change. Tonight, if there is something heavy in you, something that has been sitting in the chest for a while, something that feels as though it will always be exactly this heavy, you might hold it gently, the way you hold anything real that is also passing. Acknowledge it. This is here. This is real. This is for now what I am carrying. And also, this will change. Not because you will force it to change or will it away, only because this is the nature of all things. The tide moves, the weather shifts. The hard season gives way, eventually, to something else. And even in the hard season, somewhere in it, there is always something that is that season's own. Something that belongs only to this particular dark, this particular quiet, this particular night. Even the difficult ones. You do not have to find it tonight. You only have to let the possibility sit alongside you, as quiet and patient as the dark itself. Take a slow breath. Let the body be carried by whatever is beneath you. The bed, the ground, the solid ordinary fact of the floor. You are held. The weight of the feeling is held too. Everything is held, tonight, in the same kind darkness. We will continue together in a moment. And now, the comparing mind, the one that measures. You may know this one well. The mind that looks at other people or at other versions of you, the version you were yesterday or 5 years ago, or the version you imagine you should be by now, and measures, finds the distance between here and there, notes the gap. Sometimes the gap is painful. Sometimes it produces a kind of low, chronic disappointment that is harder to name than a specific sadness, because it has no single source. It is simply the result of spending a long time measuring. This is not a character flaw either. The mind that compares is also the mind that learns. The mind that sees the gap is the mind that can work toward something. We are not trying to say comparing is always wrong. Only that at night, in the dark, with the body tired and the day over, the measuring mind has no useful material to work with, and so it turns on what is available, which is you, and what you have done and not done, and what you are and aren't, and how that lines up against some standard that was assembled from many sources over many years, and may or may not bear much resemblance to anything actually worth measuring against. That standard is usually not something you chose consciously. It was absorbed from families, from the culture, from comparisons made early in life when you were too young to question them. It became invisible, the way the walls of a room you have lived in for a long time become invisible and so the measuring happens automatically, and the gap is felt as truth, rather than as the product of a particular and not inevitable way of looking. You are not the gap. You are not the distance between where you are and where the measuring mind says you should be. The measuring mind is a guest, like all the other voices. It can say what it says, but you are not required to believe it, and you are certainly not required to believe it at 2 a.m. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a student of calligraphy who had been learning the craft for several years at a small school run by a very old teacher. The student was talented and hard-working and deeply, privately miserable, because nothing he made ever seemed good enough to him. Every piece, when he looked at it, showed him only where it fell short. He could not see the beauty in his own work because the measuring happened so quickly, so automatically, that it arrived before the looking did. One day, he brought a new piece to the teacher. The teacher looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "Lovely." The student said, "The third character is too heavy. The balance in the second line is off. The teacher held up a hand. She said, "Those things are true. And the piece is lovely. Both things are true." The student was not sure what to do with this. After a moment, the teacher said, "The comparing mind is a useful student, but a poor master. Let it walk behind you. It does not need to walk in front." That image stayed with him. The comparing mind walking behind, still there, still taking notes, but not leading, not arriving before everything else and telling him what he was seeing before he had seen it. He did not immediately change. It took time, and it was never complete. But he began to notice sometimes the moment the measurement arrived. And in that noticing, there was a small gap, just room enough to see the piece itself before the verdict had been delivered. There is a second part to this story, from a different angle. In a harbour town, there was a baker who made plain, honest bread. She had a stall at the market, and beside her was a stall run by a younger baker whose bread was decorated and elaborate and very beautiful to look at. People often stopped to admire the younger baker's work, and sometimes they compared the two stalls aloud, in ways that were not always kind. The older baker kept baking her plain bread. She did not seem troubled by the comparison. One evening, a regular customer asked her, "Doesn't it bother you, the way people compare?" The baker, wrapped a loaf in cloth, took her time answering. She said, "I know what bread I make, it's good bread. The comparing is about what they're looking for. It's not about what's in the loaf." She handed over the loaf. She said, "I've been baking this bread for 30 years. The comparing has been going on the whole time. The bread doesn't know about the comparing. It just tastes the way it tastes." The customer went home and ate the bread and found it, that evening, unusually good. Perhaps the teaching is something like this. The comparing will continue. It is a deeply ingrained habit of mind. But somewhere underneath the comparing, underneath the measuring, underneath the gap between what is and what is supposed to be, there is simply the bread, the actual thing, the actual person, the actual you, underneath the evaluation of you. And the actual you does not know about the comparing. It simply is what it is. Tonight, if the measuring mind shows up with its gap and its verdict, you might try to let it walk behind you for a little while, not silenced, not dismissed, only placed gently behind and in front for this small nighttime hour. Just you, just here. Just the breath moving in the body that does not need to be anything other than what it is tonight. Let your forehead be smooth. Let the thoughts settle toward the bottom of the glass. the way sediment settles when the water is left alone, slowly, without forcing. You are exactly here. That is enough. When you are ready, we will go on. And here is perhaps the strangest thing of all, something that has been noticed in many traditions, by many different kinds of people, and that sounds, when you first hear it, almost too simple to be true. The thinking mind, the one that plans, worries, reviews, measures, is not the only thing you are. You are not just a thinking machine dressed in a body. There is something underneath the thinking, something that was there before you learned to read and think and analyze, something that is still there when the thinking slows, in those moments of early morning before the mind has started up, or in the last second before sleep takes you. That something is what you actually are, in some very deep and quiet sense. Not the thoughts, the one who has the thoughts. Not the stream, but the bed the stream flows through. Not the weather, the sky. And the peace you may be looking for. The quiet that feels so far away when the mind is busy. That peace is not something you are trying to arrive at. It is not somewhere else waiting. It is the quality of that something, of that underlying awareness, when the stirring stops long enough for you to feel it. This is not something you have to create. You cannot create it. You can only, perhaps, stop doing the things that hide it from you. And tonight, lying still, letting the thoughts move through without chasing them, that is the practice, not the arrival. Only the practice of stopping the chasing, stopping the stirring, and letting what is already here become a little more noticeable. Let us explore a story about this. There was a hermit who had lived for many years on the edge of a forest, and people sometimes walked a long way to ask her questions. She was not famous exactly. She did not advertise her wisdom. But word traveled the way it does in small communities, and so people came. One day, a young man arrived, who was clearly exhausted. He had been studying and practicing and seeking for years. He had read everything he could find. He had tried every method anyone had recommended. He was, he said, no closer to peace than when he started. If anything, he was further away, because he had now accumulated so many ideas about what peace was supposed to be, that the real thing, if he had ever glimpsed it, was obscured entirely. The hermit listened to all of this. Then she said, "What have you been practicing?" He listed everything. It was a very long list. She said, "And in all of that time, in all of those methods, was there never a moment of peace?" He thought. He said, "Yes, actually. Once, years ago, before I had studied very much. I was walking early in the morning and I had just woken up and I hadn't started thinking yet. And there was a moment. I don't know how long it lasted. There was just the path and the light and whatever I was. And it was the most peaceful I have ever felt." The hermit nodded. "And since then," she said. "Since then, I have been trying to get back to that," he said. "I have been trying everything I can think of to recreate it." She sat with this for a moment. Then she said, "The peace was already there. It was always already there. What you have been practicing all these years is the practicing of stopping what prevented you from noticing it. Nothing more." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "The path was peaceful that morning, not because you did something right. It was peaceful because you had not yet started doing the things that cover the peace up." He looked uncertain. She said, "You don't have to do less. You only have to stop doing the last thing, the thing you are doing right now, which is trying." There was a second student who had studied at the same monastery for several years and who had never had a significant experience of peace. She sometimes worried about this. The others seemed to report moments of stillness, of expansion, of something. She had only regular days. One afternoon she was given a free afternoon and told to simply rest. There was nowhere to be, nothing to do. She found a corner with some light and made tea and sat with it and looked out at the trees. After a while she noticed, oh, she was not thinking about anything in particular. She was just sitting, just warm, just here. It was not dramatic. It was not what she had imagined peace would feel like. But it was genuinely, quietly fine. She thought, this can't be it. It's too ordinary. But she sat a little longer, and it was still there. The ordinariness, the warmth, the gentle nothing in particular. And she began to wonder if perhaps the thing she had been looking for and the thing she was currently doing were not, after all, so far apart. Perhaps that is the second angle. The peace is ordinary. It does not arrive with flags. It is not different from the ordinary quiet of a warm room and a cup of tea and nothing being required. The seeking for something more dramatic may itself be the last piece of stirring. Tonight, lying here, nothing dramatic may be happening. And that is, perhaps, exactly where it is. Not in the dramatic breakthrough, in the ordinary quiet, in the breath, in the weight of the body in the dark, in the nothing in particular of this moment. Let the seeking rest, just for now. Let it set down its tools. Everything that has been sought is here, in its quiet, undramatic way, in the simple fact of being present. Take a long, slow breath. Let the belly rise and fall without any special effort. The breath is not trying. The breath is just being breath. And you, for this moment, can be just being you. We will go on when you are ready. The Mund at night becomes a very particular kind of workshop. It takes out all the unfinished work, the problems, the decisions, the conversations that need to happen, the ones that already happened and might need to be revisited. And it lays everything on the bench and picks up each piece and turns it over. There is in this a kind of love, a kind of care. The mind that goes over things at night is often a mind that cares deeply about getting things right, about people it loves, about the shape of the life it is living. The night thinking is not random. It is usually about what matters. But here is what the night workshop is not good at. It is not good at solving. The workshop at 2 a.m, with the body tired and the perspective narrowed by darkness and fatigue, is not actually producing better solutions than the mind would produce rested, in daylight, with breakfast in it. The rehearsal is not the preparation. The going over and over is not the solving. And there is something the body knows about sleep that the workshop mind does not know. The sleeping mind continues working, not on the surface, not in the going over and over way, but in its own deep, unhurried way, in the dark, making connections and settling things and arriving at understandings that are waiting on the surface of the morning for you to find them, like objects left on a shore by a tide. The night's work is being done in the sleeping. The going over and over is, in a sense, preventing the actual work. You can set the problem down on the workbench and close the shop. The problem will be there in the morning, and the mind, rested, will come to it differently, with wider perspective, with more patience, with the strange gifts that only sleep seems to deliver. You are not giving up on it. You are not abandoning it. You are leaving it in the best possible hands, the sleeping you, who has always been better at certain things than the exhausted, anxious, nighttime you. Let us explore a story about this. There were once 2 scholars in a mountain school who were given a task to untie a very complicated knot that had been tied by the old teacher as a kind of puzzle. The knot was not decorative. It was functional, practical, and whoever could untie it would demonstrate a kind of understanding that was hard to arrive at through study alone. The first scholar sat with the knot all day and all evening. He was diligent. He traced every crossing of the rope with his fingers, mapped it in his mind, tried different approaches. By nightfall he had made progress, but the knot was still knotted, and he stayed up through the dark hours, going over what he knew. By morning he was exhausted, and the knot was still mostly tied. The second scholar had looked at the knot that afternoon, turned it over twice, and then said, "I will look at this again tomorrow." She put it on the windowsill and went to bed at the usual hour. In the morning she sat with the knot and her hands, working with a loose and easy attention, and within an hour the knot was open. The first scholar was frustrated. He said, "You sat with it for barely any time at all." She said, "I sat with it all night, just not with my hands." She set the rope on the table. She said, "When I sleep, something works on the things I have been holding. I have learned to trust it. It does not work when I grip too hard." That is not a metaphor for laziness or avoidance. The second scholar had engaged deeply with the problem. She had given it real attention. And then she had done the hardest thing of all, which was to set it down and trust that the work would continue without her watching. Tonight, the knot is on the table. Whatever knot you have been working on, whatever problem, decision, difficulty has been occupying the workshop mind, it can sit on the table. The room is safe. The night is safe. In the morning, the knot will be there, and you will come to it with fresh hands and a mind that has been doing its own deep work in the hours you are not watching. Let the workshop close. Let the tools be still. There is no shame in closing the shop for the night. Good craftspeople have always known there is a time for working and a time for rest, and the rest is not the absence of work. It is a different kind of work. It is its own necessary thing. Let the hands be open. Let the forehead be smooth. Let the thinking, if it is still going, go more and more slowly, the way a wheel slows when no one is pushing it anymore. It doesn't stop all at once. It only slows and slows and slows. There is nothing to figure out tonight. Not one thing. You can let the mind know the shop is closed. We'll open it again in the morning. Rest here, and then we will go on. And now the stories the mind tells about itself. Every person carries a narrative, a story of who they are, where they come from, what has shaped them, what they are capable of, and what they are not. These stories are assembled from many sources. Things we were told when we were small, things that happened to us, things we concluded from experiences that may or may not have been typical. And because they have been with us for so long, they feel less like stories and more like facts, less like interpretations and more like the actual ground beneath the feet. But they are stories. This is not a criticism. Stories are how the mind makes sense of a life, how it creates continuity, meaning, direction. Stories are useful and necessary. The trouble is not in having a story. The trouble is when the story becomes a cage, when the narrative is so fixed, so certain of what you are and are not, that it closes off the possibility of being otherwise. You are more than the story. You have always been more than the story. The story says certain things about you. Maybe that you are not particularly good at rest, or that you are someone who worries, or that peace is for other people. And those things may be part of your history, but they are not your nature. They are not what you are underneath before the story was assembled. The awareness in you, the one that is hearing these words, the one that notices the thoughts, the one that was there before you learned your own name, that awareness has never been captured by any story. It simply is. It watches the stories the way the sky watches the weather, with complete availability and complete detachment, without judgment, without preference. Let us explore a story about this. Once there was a woman who had been told, very early in her life, that she was too much, too loud, too strong, too opinionated, too present. The people who told her this were not cruel. They were only limited in their own way, shaped by their own fears. But she was young, and she believed them. And over time the belief settled into her, the way sediment settles. Too much. Too much. She spent many years trying to be less, quieter, smaller, less opinionated, less present. She was not always successful at this, which she took as further evidence that something in her was difficult, ungovernable, problematic. One evening, she found herself at the house of an old teacher who had a reputation for saying things that cracked open rather than closed down. She wasn't sure why she had come. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. The teacher poured tea. They sat. After a while, the teacher said, "You seem like someone who has been carrying a verdict." The woman said, "I have been told I am too much." The teacher was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Too much for what?" The woman didn't have an answer. The teacher said, "You are the sky. The story about being too much is the weather. The sky cannot be too much. The sky is just what it is, open, enormous, capable of holding whatever passes through it." She drank her tea. She said, "The story is not wrong to exist. Stories always exist, but they are stories. They are not you." The woman went home and was not immediately different. The story had been with her for decades, and it did not disappear because someone had used a beautiful image. But something had been planted, a small crack in the wall, and through the crack, a small amount of the sky. Here is a second story, because this one is worth looking at from two sides. At a monastery, there were two students who had studied for the same number of years and were considered, by most measures, equally accomplished. One of them had constructed a very detailed story about herself. She was a disciplined practitioner. She worked harder than most people. She did not waste time. She had clear standards. The story was not false. All of those things were true of her, but the story had become so detailed and so rigid that it sat between her and everything she did, like a glass case. She experienced her own practice through the lens of the story, which meant she was always checking. Is this consistent with who I am? Is this living up to the standard? Is this the behavior of a serious practitioner? The other student had a simpler relationship with the practice. When asked who she was, she tended to say, "I'm not sure actually. I'm just here." She wasn't being falsely modest. She genuinely had not assembled a fixed story. And so she arrived at the practice fresh each time, without the glass case, without the constant evaluation. After many years, the teachers observed, the first student has improved enormously and knows it. The second student has improved enormously and is still just here. There is no judgment in this. The first student's story was not a failure. It was a very human thing, and it had served her in real ways. But there is something in the second student's unknowing, in the not having a fixed verdict, that kept her available in a way the first student sometimes was not. You are more than the story the mind has assembled about you. And tonight, in the dark, with the story quieter than it is during the day, you might rest in that. Simply hear, not the story, not the verdict, not the assembled narrative of what you are and aren't, just the awareness itself, which has no story, which only is. The story will be there in the morning. It will pick up where it left off. That is fine. That is what stories do. But for tonight, for these quiet hours, you can be more than the story. You can be the sky in which the story moves. Let the body soften into the surface that holds it. Let the breath be the simplest thing it knows how to be. There is nothing you need to be right now except present, and that is not a performance. It is what you already are. Rest here. We are nearly at the end of our walk together, but there is a little further to go. Here is something that happens when we lie down with a mind that is very full. The mind arrives with its collection, the worries, the plans, the stories, the reviews of the day, and it holds them all up, one by one, as if presenting them for approval, as if there is something about examining them one more time that will resolve them. But the mind doing this is a closed mind, in a certain sense. It is a mind with its hands full, and a mind with its hands full cannot receive anything. It can only continue holding what it is already holding. There is an old image, a bowl. An empty bowl can hold anything. Water, fruit, flowers, light. A full bowl, a bowl with something already in it, can only hold more of what it already has, or, if you try to pour something new in, the old thing spills out and makes a mess. The mind arriving at sleep with its hands full is not wrong. It is not broken. It has simply been doing what was asked of it all day. But if sleep is going to come, and rest is going to come, the bowl needs to be emptied a little, not to be made blank, not to be made thoughtless, only to be made available, open, receptive to what the night brings, rather than occupied entirely by what the day left behind. Beginner's mind, the old traditions call it, not the mind that already knows, the mind that is still capable of being surprised, the mind that meets each moment as if it has not been here before, because in fact it hasn't. This exact moment, this exact breath, this exact configuration of dark room and tired body and quiet, it has never been before, not quite. Something new is always available if the bowl is not already full. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a man who had the same dream repeatedly, many nights running, and the dream troubled him. In the dream, he was always on a road, walking toward a place he needed to reach, and something always blocked the road. A gate, a fallen tree, a crowd of people going the other way. He always woke before reaching his destination, always with a lingering sense of something unfinished. He went to an elder in the village who was known for her understanding of such things. He explained the dream in detail. He had his own interpretation. In fact, he believed it was about obstacles in his waking life, frustrations at work, barriers he could not get past. The elder listened to everything. Then she said, "Tell me the dream again, but this time, try arriving somewhere other than your destination." The man looked puzzled. She said, "When you are in the dream next time, try arriving at the road itself. The blocked road, the fallen tree. Try arriving there fully rather than past it." That night, when the dream came, he tried this. He arrived at the blocked road, and instead of trying to get past it, he sat down on it. He looked at it. He noticed the quality of the light, the sounds from the surrounding trees, the smell of the air. He stayed there. He did not reach his destination. He woke as he always did before reaching it, but the feeling when he woke was entirely different. It was not the feeling of unfinished business. It was simply the feeling of having been somewhere real. The elder, when he told her, said, "The dream wanted you to receive what was there, not to get past it. A full bowl, a mind already certain of where it needs to go, cannot receive the road. Only an empty bowl can hold what the moment actually contains. The beginner's mind receives the night as it is, not the night it expected, not the night it planned. The actual night, with the actual dark, and the actual sounds, and the actual breath, and the actual thoughts moving through, and the actual weight of the body being held. Tonight is new. This version of tonight has never been before. You have never been exactly this person in exactly this moment. And the night, which does not know your story, which does not know your history, which has no opinion about whether you are too much or not enough or doing it right or not, the night is simply here, offering what it offers, which is darkness and quiet and the possibility of rest. The empty bowl does not ask what will be put into it. It does not prepare for a particular kind of filling. It simply is what it is, open, waiting, available, and the night fills it with what the night has, which is always more than we expect when we are paying attention in the right way. The sounds we did not notice before, the warmth of the body we forgot to appreciate, the breath arriving again and again without being summoned. There is a kind of receiving that the thinking mind cannot do. It is too busy directing, evaluating, accepting this and rejecting that. The beginner's mind, the empty bowl, the open hand, these can receive what is actually here, rather than only what was expected. And what is actually here, in the dark, in the body, in the breath of this specific, unrepeatable night, is enough. It has always been enough, more than enough. Come to it with an empty bowl, or as empty as you can manage. Let go of what the night is supposed to be, and see what it actually is. The breath is slow. The room is dark. You are here. Nothing more is required. Rest for a little while. And then, there is one more thing we want to show you before we close. And now, the moon. In many of the old traditions, awareness, the quiet background awareness that underlies the thinking, the awareness that is reading these words and feeling this breath and lying in this dark, is compared to moonlight, not to the sun, which is bright and assertive and demands attention, not to firelight, which flickers and requires fuel, to moonlight, which is soft, which is sufficient for the task at hand, enough to walk by, enough to see your hands in front of you, enough to make the familiar room navigable, without overwhelming, which does not compete with anything, which does not insist on being noticed. Moonlight falls on everything equally, the clean and the untidy, the beautiful and the ordinary. It does not evaluate what it illuminates. It only illuminates, and then it is gone. And the morning comes, and the moonlight has not been diminished by anything it touched. It has simply been itself, all night, gently and sufficiently. That is, perhaps, the best image for what you actually are, underneath the thoughts, underneath the plans and the worries and the stories. A soft and sufficient light, not dramatic, not demanding, present for everything that moves through the mind the way moonlight is present for everything that moves through the night, without preference, without judgment, simply witnessing. And here is the other part of the image, which is perhaps the most useful thing to hold before sleep. There is the moon, and there is the reflection of the moon on still water, on a pond, on a quiet stretch of river, on a pool in the rocks, The reflection is perfect as long as the water is still. The moon sits there on the surface, whole, clear, bright as a coin. When something disturbs the water, a fish rising, a pebble thrown, a gust of wind, the moon on the water breaks apart. It becomes fragments, scattered light, a dozen small half-moons going in different directions. And if you did not know about the real moon up in the sky, you might think, the moon is broken. The moon is scattered, but the moon is not broken. The moon is exactly as it was. It is only the reflection that has been disturbed. And when the water calms, when the ripples pass, when the surface stills, the reflection reassembles, not because anyone has repaired it, simply because the disturbance has passed and the water has returned to its nature. The thoughts are the disturbance on the water. The worries, the plans, the voices, the reviewing of the day. They pass across the surface of awareness the way wind passes across the surface of a pond. And when they pass, the reflection reassembles. The moon is always there. It never broke. You are the moon, not the reflection, not the disturbed water, the moon. And whatever has disturbed the surface tonight, whatever thoughts or worries or feelings have been scattering the reflection, they are real and they are passing, and the moon remains unchanged in the sky it has always occupied. Let us explore one last story before we gather everything together. Once there was a traveler who was crossing a wide plain on foot, and the journey was longer than he had expected. By the time the sun went down, he was still far from the village he had been heading for, and the darkness came quickly, and the path was harder to see. He stopped, unsure whether to keep walking or to rest until morning. Then the moon rose. It was not a full moon, not quite, but it was bright enough to see the path, bright enough to see his own hands, bright enough. He walked by moonlight for several hours, not quickly. You cannot walk quickly by moonlight, and you do not need to. Slowly, step by step, the path available only as far as the next bend. Not the whole journey, not even the whole night, only the next step. And he arrived. Not because he could see the whole road, not because he had mapped it all out in advance, only because each step was lit just enough and he trusted the moon to continue doing what the moon does, which is to stay present through the whole of the night. You do not need to see the whole road from here. You do not need to know how the worry resolves, or how the situation works out, or what tomorrow holds. You only need the next breath, and then the one after that, and the awareness that is present in you right now, the moonlight quality of you, the soft and sufficient light, will be there for each of those breaths, as it has been there for every breath of your entire life without ever having to be asked. Let the body settle more deeply into the bed. Let the legs go heavy. Let the feet be still. There is nothing for the feet to do tonight, no ground they need to cover. They can simply rest in the dark, warm, finished with their work. There is nothing for you to navigate right now. The path will be there in the morning. The moon is here, and you are here, and nothing else is needed. Let us rest for a moment, here, at the edge of the closing. And now let us sit with something that the mind often overlooks entirely, because it is so plain, so ordinary, so completely without drama, that the mind moves right past it on its way to something more interesting. The breath. Not a special breath, not a breath you have been asked to take in a particular way. The breath that has been happening since the first moments of your life, without your instruction, without your oversight, without you even needing to think about it. The breath that goes on while you are sleeping, while you are arguing, while you are lost in thought, while you are in the worst moments of a difficult night. It is always there. It has always been there. It has never once required anything of you except to allow it. This is perhaps one of the most reassuring facts there is, if you let it land fully. You have been breathing your whole life without having to try. The body has been holding itself together, regulating and balancing and repairing, all on its own, all without a single conscious instruction from you. The body, whatever else you may think of it, has been doing an enormous amount of faithful work for a very long time, mostly unnoticed, mostly without thanks. There is something in that, something worth acknowledging, even now, even in the dark. The body is not your enemy tonight. It is not the thing that is keeping you awake. It is the very thing that will carry you into sleep when sleep is ready to come. Not because you forced it, not because you did anything clever, but because the body, left to its own faithful tendencies, moves toward rest the way water moves toward the sea. You do not have to make sleep happen. You only have to stop preventing it. And the body, which has known how to do this since before you could walk, will do the rest. Let us explore a story about this. There was once an apprentice in a small workshop where things were made by hand, careful, precise things that required steadiness and patience. The master of the workshop was very old and moved with a deliberateness that the apprentice had first taken for slowness and then, over time, understood as something else entirely. One evening, after a long and difficult day in which nothing had gone quite right, the apprentice threw down her tools and said, "I can't do this tonight. My hands won't steady. Everything I make comes out wrong." The master looked at her hands. He said, "Let me see them." She held them out. They were trembling just slightly with fatigue and frustration. He said, "Your hands are tired. That is all. They are not failing. They are simply tired." She said, "But I have work to finish." He said, "The hands know how to rest. The question is whether you will let them." He crossed the room and set her tools aside, very gently, as though they too needed care. He said, "Tomorrow morning, before you touch a single tool, I want you to sit with your hands in your lap and do nothing for a little while. Not think about the work, not plan, only sit, and you will feel something happen in the hands, a kind of returning, a kind of coming back into themselves. The body knows how to restore itself. It only needs permission." She was skeptical. She went home, and in the morning she sat as he had asked, though impatiently at first. And then, slowly, something did happen in the hands. A warmth, a settling, a sense of the hands simply being hands rather than instruments of a task. And when she finally picked up her tools, the steadiness had come back on its own, from somewhere she had not put it. The body knew. She had only needed to stop insisting. Tonight, perhaps, the same thing is happening. The body has been given permission to be here, in the dark, without a task. And it is doing what it does, the slow, faithful work of returning to itself, of cooling down and settling, of preparing the ground for sleep, in its own unhurried way. You do not have to help it. You do not have to direct it or monitor it or wonder if it is doing things correctly. The body has been at this work longer than the mind has been at anything. Trust it. Feel the weight of the body in the bed right now, not trying to change anything about it, only noticing. Here is weight. Here is warmth. Here is the breath moving in and out of a body that has been faithful to you all day, all year, all the years of your life. There is something almost tender in that, if you let it be. The hands can be still. The body can be still. Everything that was asked of it today has been done. Tonight, it only asks one thing, which is to be allowed to rest. Let the breath deepen just a little without forcing it. Let the belly rise. Let the chest follow. And then let the body breathe the next breath all on its own, without any help from you. There. That is the practice. That is all of it. The body already knows. Rest here for a little while. There is no hurry. And when you are ready, we will continue. Here is something that belongs in the dark, said slowly. The heart carries things that the thinking mind does not know how to hold. Not everything that is alive in us right now is a thought. Not everything that stirs in the chest, that tightens the throat, that sits like a quiet weight in the belly. Not all of it comes from thinking or worrying, or the review of the day. Some of it is older than that. Some of it is simply feeling, without a cause that can be easily named, without a problem that can be solved. Some of it is grief, or longing, or the particular kind of tiredness that is not physical, the tiredness that comes from being human in a world that asks a great deal. This kind of thing does not need to be fixed tonight. It does not need to be analyzed or understood or resolved. It only needs to be acknowledged, the way you might acknowledge a person sitting beside you in the dark, without knowing what to say, only being willing to sit there, present, not turning away. The old teachers say that the heart is like a room in a house. Some rooms we go into often. Some we have kept closed for a very long time, and the door is stiff, and we are not sure what is in there, or whether we are ready to find out. And some things live in those rooms that are not dangerous, only tender, only old, only waiting to be noticed. Tonight, you do not have to open any door you're not ready for. But if there is something in the chest, some feeling that is not a thought, not a problem, not something you can easily name, you're allowed to let it be there, without trying to push it down, without trying to sort it into categories. Only, here is something in me that is real. I do not know exactly what it is. I am letting it be here. That is enough. That is more than enough. Let us explore a story about this. There was once an elder in a mountain village who was known for the way she listened. People came from neighboring valleys when they had things they needed to say out loud, things that had no clear shape or solution, things that were simply in need of being heard. She never offered advice unless it was asked for. She only listened, and people went away from those conversations feeling, in some way they could not always describe, lighter. One day, a young man came to see her, who was not in obvious distress. He was not grieving any particular loss. He had not had an especially difficult season. He simply said, "There is something in me that I cannot name, and it has been there for a long time, and I don't know what to do with it." She said, "Sit down." He sat. She said, "What does it feel like?" He thought. He said, "Like something that wants to be put down, but I don't know how to put it down because I don't know what I'm holding." She nodded slowly. She said, "Tell me what you do know about it. Not what it is, only what you know." He said, "It's heavy sometimes. Other times I forget it's there. It's been with me since," he paused, "since something that happened a long time ago, I think. Not a terrible thing, but something I have never quite finished with." She said, "And what would it feel like if you let it sit in the room here, between us, without trying to explain it further?" He wasn't sure. She said, "Try." He sat with that for a long moment, and something happened that surprised him. The thing in the chest, still unnameable, still not resolved, seemed, in the not trying to explain it, to become somehow more bearable, not lighter exactly, but less isolated, less like something he had to carry alone. She said, after a while, "Some things live in us not as problems, but as companions. They are not asking to be solved. They are only asking to be acknowledged, not fixed, only known." He went home that evening, and the unnameable thing was still there, but the relationship to it had shifted, just slightly. He was no longer fighting it. He was, for now, simply its keeper. Perhaps that is what is happening in you right now, in some quiet corner of the chest or the belly or the throat. Something that is not a problem and not a thought, only feeling, only what it means to be a person who has lived a life, who has cared about things, who has been changed by what has happened, who carries both the difficulty and the beauty of all of it, all at once, in the dark. You do not have to do anything with it tonight. You do not have to name it or understand it or decide anything about it. You only have to let it be there, beside you, the way anything true can be beside you without requiring you to act. There is something kind about the dark in this way. The dark does not ask you to explain yourself. It does not need you to be a particular kind of person or to have arrived at any particular understanding. It only holds whatever is here, all of it, without judgment, without preference. You are held in the dark the same way, all of you, the easy parts and the complicated parts, the parts you understand and the parts you do not, the things you are proud of and the things you are still working through, all of it, held in the same quiet dark. Let the face soften. Let the area around the eyes and the jaw and the temples be soft. Let the throat be easy, not tight. If there is something in the chest, let it be there without pressing on it or trying to move it. Only, this is here. I am here too. That is enough for tonight. Take a breath as slowly as it wants to come. Let it go just as slowly. There is no rush. There is nowhere to be. When you are ready, there is one more thing to sit with before we gather everything together. There is a kind of tiredness that only comes at the end of a long, good effort. Not the sharp, frantic tiredness of a day that asked too much, but a deeper, more settled tiredness. A tiredness that has earned its place. The tiredness of a body and a mind that have genuinely worked, that have shown up for the day and done what the day required, and are now truly and fully ready to let the day be done. If you can feel anything like that tonight, even a small version of it, even the edge of it, let it be welcome. Let it be what it is. Because this kind of tiredness is not a problem to be solved. It is the body's own signal that the work is complete, that the day has been lived, that what was asked has been answered, and that now, honestly and without apology, rest is not only permitted but earned. You have been here all day. You have carried what you carried. You have thought your thoughts and navigated your hours and brought yourself to the end of this day in one piece, which is itself no small thing. The days do not always hold together cleanly. Sometimes just arriving at the night intact is the whole of the accomplishment. You arrived. And so rest is not a retreat from the day. It is the completion of it, the last act, the one that makes everything that came before it possible to sustain. The rest that comes at the end of real effort is not weakness. It is the whole point of the effort, that it can be set down, that it can be finished, that the body and the mind and the heart can have their restoration and come back tomorrow with something to give. Let us explore a story about this, In a valley between two ranges of mountains, there was a small community of people who made their lives from the land. They grew food and kept animals and repaired what broke and helped one another when help was needed. The work was honest, and it was hard, and it was never quite finished, because such work never is. At the edge of the community, in a house near the woodline, there lived an old woman who had worked her whole life and was now in the season of life where the body could do less, but the wisdom had accumulated like good soil. She was known for a particular thing, she said, at the end of a day's shared work, when the group gathered before parting. She would look around at the tired faces and the dirty hands and the satisfied and sometimes hollow eyes of people who had given their full measure to the day, and she would say something like, "The day is finished. It doesn't need you anymore." It sounds simple, but people found it difficult to hear and easy to forget, because the mind, of course, does not stop when the day is finished. The mind goes on into the evening and the night carrying its agenda, unable to accept that the day is genuinely over, that nothing more is being asked, that the work is complete for now. One autumn evening, a young man who had been struggling to sleep came to her with his difficulty. He said, "The day ends, but I can't end with it. I lie down and it keeps going inside me." She said, "The day is a river. You have been in the river all day, being moved by it. When evening comes, you step out of the river, but you carry the water in your clothes for a while." He said, "How long?" She said, "Less time if you wring out the clothes, more time if you hold them tightly against you, afraid to release what they hold." He thought about this. She said, "Letting go of the day is not forgetting it. It is not erasing what happened. It is only stepping out of the river. You can look back at it from the bank. You can acknowledge what it carried today. And then you can let the bank be solid and still and completely separate from the moving water." He went home and lay down, and he tried this. He tried to feel the bank beneath him, the solid, still, unmoved place, and to let the river of the day go on without him in it. It was not easy. The mind kept wading back in, but each time he noticed himself back in the current, he tried again to find the bank. Slowly, the river began to seem further away. Slowly, the bank became more real beneath him. He slept eventually in the way that sometimes happens, not dramatically, not with a sense of accomplishment, but simply and quietly, the way a candle goes out when there is no more wax. Tonight, you can step out of the river. The day is behind you. It is complete. Whatever it held, the good parts and the difficult parts, the finished things and the unfinished things, all of it belongs to today, and today is over. You are on the bank now. The river goes on. You do not have to go with it. Let the body feel the stillness of the bank. Let the bed be solid and real beneath you. Let the pillow be the ground. Let all the moving and churning of the day go on somewhere far enough away that you can hear it only faintly, the way you can hear a river from a house set back in the trees. You're not in it right now. You are resting beside it, and the river will be there in the morning, ready to carry you again. But right now, the bank is yours. The stillness is yours. The night is yours. Let the legs be heavy. Let the arms be heavy. Let the whole body give itself over to the ground that holds it, fully and without reservation, the way any tired thing gives itself over to rest when it has finally been given permission. The day is finished. It doesn't need you anymore. Rest here, and then we will gather everything together, gently before we close, now let us gather things together, gently, the way you might gather the ends of a day. There is a woman. Let us call her simply a woman, because she is everyone who has been lying awake, not dramatically, not in crisis, only in the ordinary way that many people lie awake, the mind turning over things, the day unwilling to fully release her, the sleep that seemed close an hour ago, now seeming further. She is not trying to meditate. She is not trying anything in particular. She has simply been lying here in the dark, and at some point she noticed, not with great fanfare, only with a small quiet noticing, that she was watching the thought loop rather than inside it. The thought loop is still going. There is something in it about tomorrow, and something about a conversation she has been putting off, and somewhere in the background the persistent and familiar sense that something is not quite resolved. The loop is real. The thoughts are real. She is not pretending they are not there, but she is watching them. There is a small gap between her and the thoughts, just the width of a noticing, just enough room to say quietly, there is the loop, there is the thought about tomorrow, there is the familiar feeling. She does not solve anything in this noticing. Nothing is fixed. The situation she has been worrying about is unchanged. The thought is still there, but something in her has shifted, just slightly, the way a held breath shifts when it is finally allowed to release. She notices, there is the thought, and I am the one who notices it. And those two things are not the same. She does not fall asleep immediately. It does not work like a switch. But something has changed in the quality of the darkness. Something has eased. The thoughts are still there, but they are somehow less adhesive, less absolute, less the whole truth, and more the weather. She thinks of muddy water and settling. She thinks of the sky that is never harmed by its own weather. She thinks, briefly and without meaning to, of a lamp burning in a window, burning without anyone watching it. And somewhere in that thinking, which has grown slow and loose and circular in the best way, she drifts. She does not know she has drifted. That is the nature of it. The last thing she is aware of is the breath. And then there is nothing. And then it is morning. By morning, she has forgotten most of it. The sky and the moon and the old gardener and the woman with the cracked pots. She does not remember the fisherman or the calligraphy student or the woman told she was too much. She does not remember the traveler and the moonlit plain. But something is different in the morning, in a way she cannot name. A small, residual something, a slight softening, a barely perceptible sense that she is slightly larger than her own thoughts, that the worries are real and not the whole thing. She gets up and makes tea and starts the day. This is what the teaching does, perhaps, when it works. Not a transformation, not a sudden arrival at peace, only a small, quiet residue, a slight change in the quality of the relationship between the person and their own mind, a little more sky visible above the weather, and the residue accumulates if you let it, not from a single night, not from this one long walk through the dark, but from the slow practice of returning again and again to the simple and astonishing fact that you are not your thoughts. You are the one in whom the thoughts arise, the sky in which the weather moves, the house in which the guest stays, the shore the tide washes up on. You have always been this. You were this before any of tonight's words arrived. You will be this tomorrow, in the midst of the day with all its activity and noise, and the thousand things it will ask of you. Even then, perhaps especially then, there is a sky underneath all of it, spacious, unhurt, exactly itself. You do not have to remember how to find it. You only have to remember that it is there. That is enough. That has always been enough. Because the sky does not require you to do anything in order to remain the sky. It only needs you to stop for a moment, insisting that you are the weather. You have walked a long road tonight to arrive at a very simple place. Here, this breath, this body, this dark, that is everything. You have that now. You have walked through the sky and the weather, through the voice in the head and the one who hears it, through the muddy water settling and the knot set gently down, through the cracks in the pot and the cup that can be placed on the table, through the garden growing faithfully in the dark while the gardener finally rests, through the tide that turns and the season that shifts, through the measuring mind and the story we tell about ourselves, through the empty bowl and the moonlit road, through the body that has always known how to rest and has only been waiting for permission, through the feelings that do not need to be fixed, only held, through the riverbank that is solid beneath a person who has finally, gratefully, stepped out of the current. You do not have to carry any of this. You do not have to remember it. It has already settled into you the way anything gently offered settles in, without effort, without your having to make room for it. The woman in the story did not remember the teachings, and something was different in the morning. That is enough. That is more than enough. And so we have walked a long way together, through the weather and the sky, through the voice and the listener, through the fisherman in the early dark, and the woman who stopped pulling at the knot, and the student who found the peace she wasn't looking for in an afternoon with tea, through the potter and the cracked pots and the light that comes through a crack in the wall, through the man who set down his cup and found that the garden was still there, through the garden growing in the dark, faithfully, without anyone watching, through the old gardener who stopped arguing with what grew, through the woman by the sea who learned that moods are tide, and the monk who made friends with the winter, through the calligraphy student whose teacher said, "Let the comparing mind walk behind," through the baker who baked her bread and did not watch the measuring, through the hermit who said the peace was always already there, and the student who found it in an ordinary afternoon, through the scholars and the knot and the one who slept on it, through the woman told she was too much and the sky that cannot be, through the traveller and the moonlit plain, and the step that is always lit just enough, through the apprentice whose hands knew how to rest, and the old woman who stopped digging for water she was already standing in, through the elder who said, "The day is finished, it doesn't need you anymore," and the man who finally learned to stand on the bank beside the river of the day, watching it go on without him. You do not have to remember any of these people. They have done their work. They have walked through and left quietly, the way guests do when it is late and the candle is burning low and everyone is kind and unrushed. They came only to point at something. They were never the thing they pointed at. You are the thing they pointed at. And it is nothing exotic. It is nothing distant. It is the same thing that has been here all evening, underneath all of this. The quiet that was already present in the room before the first word arrived. The breath that was already moving. The simple, undemanding fact of being here. There is a reason the old traditions return, again and again, to the image of returning. Not arriving somewhere new. Returning. Coming back to what was always here, underneath the going away. The teaching is always pointing home, and home is always where you already are, in the body, in the breath, in the particular weight of this body on this surface, in this darkness at this hour. You are home. You have always been home. The whole journey tonight was only to show you that you never left. What remains is simpler than any story. The breath, rising and falling without being asked. The body, lying here, held by whatever holds you. The dark room, ordinary and safe, doing what dark rooms do, which is simply be dark, simply be room, holding you without needing anything from you, asking nothing, requiring nothing. You are not required to be anything right now. You are not required to have learned anything tonight, or to carry any of it forward, or to be different tomorrow than you were today. The night makes no demands. The dark makes no demands. Whatever you are, in this moment, is exactly sufficient. Let the thoughts move through, if they move. Let them be what they are, weather, guests, the tide. They do not need your management tonight. They will do what they do, they always have. And underneath them, as they move, there is the same sky there has always been. Unchanged, unworried, simply present. And you are the sky in which they move, the house in which the guest sits, the shore the tide washes up on, unchanged when the tide goes out, the bed of the river through which the current flows, without being the current. You are the noticer, not the noticed things. You are the moon, not the reflection on the water, not the disturbance that scatters the reflection. The moon in the sky, where it has always been and will always be, doing its quiet, sufficient work through the whole of the night, requiring nothing of anyone. Let that be the last thought, if a thought is needed, and then let even that one go. The breath is slow, the room is dark, the body is held. Everything that needed doing today has been done. Everything that needs doing tomorrow will wait until tomorrow. Right now, there is only this, only here, only the breath, moving, only you, exactly here, exactly as you are, which is exactly enough. Nothing else is required of you, not tonight, not in this moment, not now. The breath is here, you are here. That is the whole of it. That has always been the whole of it. Sleep well.